Welcome. Today I have Dainis Zegners with me. Dainis is somebody whom I met in my childhood at the chess club, actually. And now we both are in academia, and we both did together some research on chess. Dainis, welcome. Could you maybe say a few words about yourself and where you are at the moment?
Yes, thanks a lot, Christian, and happy to be here. Yeah, actually in the chess club, so you used to win the Blitz tournaments, and I was always on last board, kind of, yeah.
But now I have only one publication about chess together with you, and you have a lot of other publications about chess.
Yes, and I'm currently assistant professor at the Rotterdam School of Management in the Department of Technology and Operations. So usually I do research on online markets, but yeah, in the recent years I've been involved in a couple of projects where we use chess as a setting. We study the moves that the players make, and kind of like the connecting theme is that I use in all of the projects the chess engine to measure the decision performance.
Okay, so you have the quality. You have the quality of the moves, and this is of course something which you cannot assess yourself if it's Magnus Carlsen playing or somebody, but
maybe you could, but
no, definitely not. But it's rather you see how well he performs in comparison to something like Stockfish. Is that right?
Exactly. So we take the chess engine over the data set that we want to analyze, and let for every move that we have in our data set, let Stockfish kind of give its assessment. What would be like the best move in the situation, and then we can look whether the chess players actually make that move or do not make that move. And it's a kind of a methodology to basically, as you said, to study the decision quality of the players. And then in each of the projects, we look at different questions where we use basically this measurement of the decision quality of the players.
Okay, I mean, at a later point of the interview, I would like to come back a bit more deeply into how you do the measurement. Mm-hmm. But I think maybe the most interesting thing is not this technical details, but it's more for which kind of settings you can use chess. So I think one study that you have is on the effect of age on productivity. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So in one paper, so we have also information on how old the chess players are, and we have like many observations for each individual chess player, so we can observe the whole career of the chess player and look at how his or her decision quality develops over the lifetime, basically. So
okay, are we already past our prime or not?
Christian, we are very close. So actually what we find in the paper is so that usually there is not an exact peak, so that it's very, very difficult to say where there's actually like your peak age, but it's more like a between 20 and 40, it's more like a plateau. So it's kind of like the within 20 and 40, basically your decision performance stays relatively constant, but then after 40, and Christian, we're coming close a little bit, I believe, then you start to see a drop in the decision quality of the chess players.
So is that the same for ELO rating? I mean, that would be another natural variable that you could consider instead of just measuring the quality of the moves?
I mean, you would kind of get probably similar results when you study the ELO rating, and there's other papers, projects that do that. But the nice thing about using the chess engine is that you have comparable measurements overall, basically the whole data set. So with ELO is only a relative measure, so you can only measure your strength kind of comparing to your opponents. But if you make comparisons over larger time periods, amounts of time, ELO kind of changes. We have ELO inflation. ELO actually only was introduced in the 70s, and using the chess engine, and that's also what we do in the project, we can go 100 years back to the times of Wilhelm Steinitz, and include all of these players basically, and use the same exact measurement to measure their decision quality. So you see not only how the age affects the players, but you also see like general trends in how the general decision quality of the players, their chess strength, but kind of measured absolutely using the chess engine as a benchmark developed over the last 100 years.
Okay, and can we transfer this to other economic settings? Like, I mean, is it a question of productivity, or what is the idea behind that?
Yes, so the idea is a little bit, I mean, that's a very good question. So, I mean, we are chess players, so we are very interested in that. But the problem is that in other research, so you have things like IQ tests where you try to measure something like intelligence of people, or you have other studies that look at productivity. But the problem is a little bit that you never have kind of like a constant task that basically stays the same over 100 years. Yeah, so IQ tests were only introduced also, I believe, in the 70s, so you can only go back to 1970. But chess, the rules of chess have more or less stayed constant over the last century, so you can really make these long-term comparisons. And then the question is, what are we actually measuring? How can we transfer it to other settings? It's basically anything. Yeah, I mean, anything that you could think of as maybe comparable in chess in terms of requiring a high degree of concentration, cognitive concentration. So these tasks that are maybe a little bit a mix between computation in chess, like calculating moves, but also that are based on some knowledge or experience that you learn. So the nice thing about chess, it's kind of like a combination of all of those, and that's basically what you're measuring.
Okay, great. So we already learned that there is the age factor which influences your playing strength, and that we peak between 20 and 40. But there might be also other things which influence your playing strength, and we have actually one joint work. And I was very happy when I had the idea that I know, okay, there is this great chessonomist, so let's just ask him what he thinks about it. And luckily, Dainis agreed to work with me on that idea and with Steffen. So maybe you could also say a few words about that, which is about playing online versus playing offline.
Yes, I'm very happy to tell about the project. So at that time, I was a little bit, so I have a couple of other chess projects. I was thinking, maybe these are too many. I should not start again a new chess project. But then Christian came with this great idea, and then, okay, this is really a project that I have to pursue with Christian. So the idea came during the beginning, the first days of the COVID pandemic, where we experienced that we all had to move our jobs basically from working, in our case, in the university, and others working in the office, to working from home. And the same happened to the chess players. So they, instead of playing in real life tournaments where you sit across the chessboard to your opponent, there were kind of these online tournaments being introduced by Magnus Carlsen. And we use that basically as a setting to measure also the decision performance the chess players are kind of like workers working in a cognitively demanding task, and how basically the switch to an online-only setting impacts their decision quality.
Yeah, and I think we found that people play worse online, which is maybe also what you have experienced yourself. If you played online, at least that's the same what I have experienced subjectively. But we could measure it with the same measurement that Dainis already explained before. So just figuring out whether Stockfish likes the moves of Magnus better in the online tournaments compared to the previous other offline tournaments like the World Rapid. So there is one more project I would like to ask you about, since you presented it today. I was very happy to learn about this. It's basically a project where you use against Stockfish and measure it against a human player. But this time you also use a much weaker version of Stockfish. You basically make it weak enough such that it is equally good as a human player. So what is that about?
Yeah, so the idea is basically, we can just use like this strong Stockfish engine. So we tune it so that it's stronger than any player in the data set, like stronger than Magnus Carlsen. And then obviously you see like lots of deviations by the players, that they do not always play the move that is suggested by Stockfish. And now you try to think which are the psychological factors that maybe impact these decisions of the player. So why do they not play the best move as by Stockfish? And what we noticed a little bit is that you can be very quick by making this comparison to already trying to make conclusions where you think it's kind of okay, we see in certain positions we see deviations by the chess players, so we see that when they are in a better position they tend to play a little bit worse. When they're in a better position they tend to play a little bit better. You can be very quick to jump to the conclusion that these are psychological factors, that they try harder depending on in which situation they are. But we then started to notice that instead, if you look at computer games, so where two computers play against each other, and then you measure their decision performance against a version of Stockfish.
So the computers are, just to make it clear, the computers are weaker versions of Stockfish which are comparable in strength to the human players, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So we basically restrict the number of moves that Stockfish looks ahead, so that it roughly corresponds to like the average grandmaster in our data set. And then you would start to see kind of similar patterns that this weaker version of Stockfish would also play worse in positions that it's better, or play better when it's worse. And therefore we kind of like came up with the idea that actually the relevant comparison is, if you want to identify uniquely human psychological factors, you should not compare it to the strong version of Stockfish, because obviously the humans do not have the computational capacity of something like modern Stockfish running on modern hardware. But instead, we're comparing it to this weaker version of Stockfish that is, in terms of kind of like computational power, I mean, the chess engine thinks very differently, but it's kind of this weaker version of Stockfish is kind of comparable in strength.
Okay, are there any systematic differences between the engine and the way humans make their decisions?
Yes, of course, and I mean we want to actually find out like these decisions. I mean every chess player knows that of course we do not calculate all the millions or billions of possible moves arising from a position, but we focus more on a very small set of moves. But we use things like intuition and our knowledge of other kind of chess positions to decide on the specific move. So it's very different, but exactly want to identify basically how these differences translate also into performance differences.
Okay, that sounds very interesting, but also not easy to do that, of course. Yeah. So let me finally ask you two questions. One is a bit more about the methodology. So if somebody wants to run such a study, what should you watch out for? What are the possible pitfalls, and how do you set up the methodology?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, people always think that it's that the most difficult thing is just like running Stockfish on such a large number of games. So we use it on a data set of 100,000 moves or even more. So people always think that that's the hard part, but actually these days computing power is very cheap. So we actually run Stockfish in the Amazon cloud, where you can rent one computer for 1 hour for less than 1 cent. So actually, I mean, as soon as you like know a little bit of programming, it's relatively straightforward to set up. But the difficulty comes later in analyzing basically these data that are generated. And specifically, I mean, it goes a little bit into kind of more statistical kind of issues. But the problem is that the main problem is that even relatively weak players would still, in many cases, play the best move as suggested by Stockfish. So these are like obvious moves, as just like if you're in check, then move your king away, or just like a straightforward developing move. So even like for weak players, you would find that in many cases they play the best move suggested by Stockfish.
Okay, so these are basically zeros in the data that you also would find in other situations.
Yeah.
I wonder if this might be even a bigger problem in the future, because I mean right now maybe if you identify something as a mistake of 0.5, maybe a future computer who's like completely thinking through the entire game and maybe has even a table base of a larger number of pieces, would then just not identify this move as an error anymore, whereas a human player would still say, okay, it's not a good move, but maybe it doesn't change the evaluation from winning to drawn or something like this. Is there a danger of this, or is there something more to develop there?
I mean, I think that's exactly where our methodology comes in, with like comparing the moves of the human not only to the very strong Stockfish, but also like to a worse version that is more comparable to the strength in humans, because then it becomes easier to kind of like see actually deviations from the engine evaluations.
Okay, I would
and I guess what the other thing that you're hinting at is that if a strong chess engine can even save like a worse position, can still save it, and therefore if it can kind of foresee this in its game move, then it would even conclude, even if it's a bad move, it still leads to a draw, and therefore by definition it's not a bad move. For that I think you probably should use kind of the restricted engine. Yeah.
Okay. Then I would like to end with a bit more of an open question. So first of all, to which kind of settings do you think this kind of analysis is transferable in general? and what kind of settings could we still plan and do in the future, and where are maybe bounds of this idea?
Yeah, so I mean, as I explained already, so chess is kind of like a cognitively demanding task, but of course it's kind of like a very simplified task where you only making moves at a chessboard, so to say. So I think the comparison is more to other tasks that are kind of like very concentrated. So maybe I mean, good comparisons are maybe like a pianist playing the piano. That's although it's very complex, it's still kind of a very well-defined task.
Okay.
But anything where you have kind of like I mean, typically we think of like a normal job as consisting of like a multitude of very different tasks. So it's more like the comparison is more, not what kind of jobs or what are like jobs that we can compare basically to a chess player. It's more about like specific tasks that have kind of this combination of cognitively demanding but requiring like a combination of skills, not only calculation but also experience.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we should bear in mind that chess is just one specific setting in which you can study productivity, and so it's one part of a bigger puzzle. So if you think about the entire literature, it's of course not, this is chess and this tells us everything about productivity, but it's just one kind of stone of the puzzle, right? It's not.
Exactly. I think actually that's some people criticized our study on the chess players working from home on that regard. So I mean, how can you only draw conclusions from this one setting? And that's of course true, but we need kind of like many different settings from very different kind of like tasks and jobs to kind of start to make like very broad conclusions. So it's only one part of the puzzle.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dainis. I think this was a very insightful interview for me. I hope it's the same for our viewers. And I wish you all the best in future chess studies, but of course also on your academic journey more generally.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Christian. This was fun. Yeah.